So what's the reason that these electromagnetic frequencies are affecting or doing harm to the body? Like what's the reason our mitochondria become dysfunctional after being exposed to these non-native electromagnetic frequencies?
Yeah, and this is a great topic and one that I could talk about probably for hours, and one that I highlight in my course. I've talked about in my podcast. Is it's up for debate. Actually, a lot of these researchers like Ollie Johansson and Martin Powell, they talk about like activation of these voltage-gated calcium channels, which causes calcium influx into the cell. There's a ton of studies just showing and causing oxidative stress of the mitochondria, which is basically just a loss of redox homeostasis when there's so many free radicals produced that your body's natural antioxidants can't keep up. That's the whole antioxidant theory of aging, why we should take all these supplemental antioxidants to combat free radicals. But that's a terrible idea because they don't even work well. And reactive oxygen species are important signaling molecules. The mitochondria is an important signaling molecule, like for our immune system and for causing adaptation and reformation depending on the inputs like seasonality and food, for example. So what EMFs fundamentally, in my opinion, what those guys are talking about, those are true, but they're just more downstream, right? So
Mhm,
what's the most upstream is what I just said. We are electromagnetic beings
mhm,
and we run off of certain frequencies, certain inputs, right? So inputs to the body are light, our food, our temperature, oxygen, and these are telling our body what season it is, how warm it is, and are we able to synthesize vitamin D from the sun, for example. That will dictate how uncoupled our mitochondria can be and then how effective they are at producing heat. So for example, like if it's the winter in Wyoming, which I'm going back to, there's no UVB. I'm not producing any vitamin D. So it's going to be telling my mitochondria, okay, we could probably, and the temperature is cold, and especially if I'm embracing that, I'm not wearing 25 layers, and I'm actually going outside in the cold, I'm cold plunging to even upregulate that
mhm,
input signal further. My body's gonna be like, damn, we need to produce more heat,
mhm,
and that'll allow those signals to work. So as an engineer, I just think about this as a system, right? We need to give the proper input signals to have the proper output. And the output is energy, it's heat production, it's really just function of our biology based on the environment that we are living in. But if we're not embracing that environment, then we're not going to get the right output. So
mhm,
that's pretty much like what I think about as mitochondrial dysfunction 101. And what EMFs are doing, they're just providing the wrong input signal. They're providing a foreign photonic source that's at frequencies that our body is not programmed to do much with, right? Like we're programmed to run off light in the visible UV infrared spectrum. And then, there's certain frequencies like the Schumann's resonance, which is low, less than 100 hertz. 7 to 10 hertz is the first harmonic. So then when we have this signal of 50, 60 hertz from our electrical power grid, you're just confusing the body. So you're causing this dysfunction. And you can get, this is really high level. And just to step it down further for like an example, and we've done podcasts on this on Decentralized Radio with Carrie Bennett and the Grounded Athlete a little bit, is talking about the water in our body, the water communication, protein communication matrix. This is really a very electromagnetic process and
mhm,
system. And we know that water traps electromagnetic signals, kind of acts as an antenna. And structuring this water is necessary to exclude toxins, to have sufficient proton and electron flow. And really, electromagnetic fields from technology completely disrupts this process, completely disrupts the functionality of water. So you get impaired cellular communication, you get impaired energy production, and that ultimately leads as well to mitochondrial dysfunction. So you create this negative feedback loop. And there's just so many instances of this that we're just beginning to uncover. Really, the water piece is big for me. I would say that's probably the most important piece where
mhm,
EMFs cause harm because we're 50 to 70% water
mhm,
depending on how old you are and how unhealthy you are, and that's by volume. By molecule count, we're 99% water. So we're water mostly,
Mhm.
and water is used. No one talks about water being really important. They just tell you to drink water, which actually the water you drink does pretty much nothing. It's the water
Mhm.
your mitochondria produce at complex 4 that's probably more important than ATP itself. But
Mhm.
again, nobody talks about this in centralized biology. So that water is, one of the main semiconductors, conductors, just it conducts protons and electrons, and again it operates electromagnetically. So if we have these electromagnetic fields, and folks like Gerald Pollack, who studies this structured water, has said on podcasts as well that infrared light expands the exclusion zone in the structured water the most, 3 to 4x. What he put a Wi-Fi router next to it and it completely collapsed it. So you're
Wow.
completely collapsing your water battery, the ability for water to really act as this communication hub and also operate in these coherent domains. Like we don't know all the depths of function from the water network in our biology, but it's we know it's so important. And when you do this research from folks like Maywan Ho and Emilio Del Giudice, you realize that non-native EMFs are completely disrupting the ability for water to function properly in our body, and that's leading to a whole host of issues. So I think that's one of the most upstream ways that EMFs cause dysfunction, and that will lead to mitochondrial dysfunction as well. But there are other ways, and ultimately, it all leads to what you call oxidative stress, which is
Mhm.
just cause cellular damage from free radical formation over time. And yeah, it's really interesting, and something you can geek out about a lot, and something I'm going to talk a lot more about and dive deeper into in future courses, future modules, future podcasts. Like we're just really, really uncovering kind of the depths of this now, and it's exciting. But
Yeah.
again, simple conclusion is we're not designed to operate on these foreign frequencies, these
Mhm.
foreign fields at this intensity level. And really, our electromagnetic biology is pretty precise at a pretty minuscule intensity. So
Mhm.
the signal to noise ratio, if that's one thing you got to remember, the noise has never been higher.
Mhm.
And that cause imagine trying to communicate in if you've ever been in Central Station in New York City or a subway, and say there's 100 people, an amusement park, Disney World, I don't know, airport, say there's 100 people around you, and you're just trying to talk to one person next to you.
Yeah.
Think of how much harder it is to talk to that person next to you when there's
Mhm.
100 people around you. Now think of how easy it is for, say, me and you, Alfonso, to just talk if we're in the same room with nobody around.
Mhm.
That's because there's no noise, right? There's no noise messing up that communication. So EMFs are really just that noise in the room. They're causing this dysfunction by causing a tremendous amount of noise in our biology's cellular communication. And that leads to issues. I'm not going to be able to hear what you're saying as well. And I'm going to misinterpret things. And I'm
Mhm.
going to make decisions based on that misinterpretation. That's going to lead to, chaos down the road. So it's a nice example. And the
Mhm.
more and more we pile on, like maybe in the 60s, there was 10 people in the room from non-native EMFs. Maybe in the 80s, 90s, there was 25 people in the room. Now there's probably 1,000 people in the
Yeah.
room, and they're getting tightlier and tightlier packed as we just keep coming out and keep using technology more and more.
Yeah, it's mind blowing. So, what's the mission for the course?
Really to just give a foundational understanding, because I'm not going to lie, I see a lot of health influencers talking about EMFs. I see people shilling products that they have no idea how it works, if it works. They just got an affiliate link and probably a nice kickback, and nobody really understands EMFs, that
Mhm.
like straight up. So I just wanted to, and I've seen other courses out there and things like that, and I just don't think they're very good. I don't think anyone is taking this holistic view. And it's something I realized. I've talked to and collaborated with a lot of the EMF experts in the space that are actually electrical engineers or actually been EMF consultants for years, and ones that are building solutions that actually work, not like woo woo $1,000 harmonizers to give you a teaser. And Yeah, they actually don't agree on a lot of things. There's dirty electricity, there's electric fields, there's magnetic fields, there's 5G. What's worse? What's more important to worry about? So I wanted to just lay it out for people, right? So the way I structured it was that the first section is really like electromagnetism 101. What are waves? What are photons? What's the spectrum? Talking about light, non-visible light. Because if you don't understand the units, right, like volts per meter, milligauss, microtesla, power density is how you measure RF. If you don't know any of these units and you don't know frequency, wavelength relationship, it's not that complicated. It's like a couple equations, a couple units, understanding photons, and then you can go and like read a research paper and be like, oh yeah, wow, that makes sense. Oh, actually, that's fascinating that that frequency, which is so close to like Wi-Fi, for example, like microwaves operate at 2.5 gigahertz, 2.45, I think, to heat up your food. Wi-Fi is 2.4 gigahertz. It's basically the same exact frequency.
Yeah.
So, that's something to think about. How are microwaves working to heat up your food? They're just oscillating the water molecules at this frequency and dehydrating them to warm them up. So what
Mm.
happens when you sit in an airplane that's a Faraday cage